Well, when one prison door closes, another opens. While American protesters demand the shutdown of the Guantanamo Bay detention facility, another prison may be replacing it. A prison in Afghanistan may be the next to house suspected terrorists. Joining me now to talk about this live from Los Angeles is Jake Diliberto of Rethink Afghanistan. Jake, thanks so much for joining me. So do you think that Bagram, that detention facility in Afghanistan, is going to be the next Guantanamo Bay?
Well, I think it already has. I think that Bagram has been a place where the United States has taken prisoners into and held as a part of the occupation in Afghanistan. A problem with that is that there's been a lot of people that have been held there accidentally who perhaps didn't necessarily need to be there. And this is a security threat for the United States. It's hurt our ability to win the hearts and the minds. And I think this is a really national security threat, too, because it gives jihadism a tool, a recruiting tool, and it's a national security threat.
And obviously, you know, it's being considered that many of these detainees will be moved to Bagram. But, I mean, how is that really solving anything? President Obama has said repeatedly that he wants to close down Guantanamo Bay. But moving these detainees to another facility that has had several of its own scandals in the past, as you mentioned, I mean, is that really an answer?
No, it's not. Really, what we need to see in Afghanistan is we need to see the real criminals, the ones who are perpetrating human rights abuses, and the ones who the Afghans don't like. We need to see those people in prison and brought with the rule of law, open and public to all of the Afghan people, and held within the international courts. If the United States is the sole individual state that's carrying out the imprisonment, we are losing our face within the international community and to the Afghans. I just returned from Afghanistan a few days ago, and I met with human rights officers as well as people within the Karzai government. And this is something that everyone is urging the United States and the international community to do, and seek out international courts, be open and public about the crimes that people are being accused from, and no longer have secret prisons. If we do not do that, we are going to slowly lose the credibility we have within the international world. We're going to lose our credibility with the Afghans, and we're going to have a national security threat to ourselves.
And I mean, are there any laws out there, you mentioned that you just returned, to protect detainees at Bagram? I mean, are there any human rights advocates out there to make sure that nothing bad happens?
Well, I think that the United States is training its individuals to be disciplined, to do its best to follow the rule of law. But in a war zone, things get really complicated, and there's not simple answers from the time someone gets detained to the time that they get put in jail. It's a very convoluted situation that passed many hands, and so it's a difficult way to track exactly what happens. But what we have been seeing within the Afghan government that I just spoke with, that the Afghans are monitoring each and every individual prisoner, and they're raising the flags if someone is being held illegally or if they're being abused. Amnesty International is there trying to raise awareness of this as well. And I hope that the viewers of RT as well as across the world recognize that it's a complex situation, and the United States needs to be held to follow the rule of law.
And, you know, Jake, Guantanamo Bay has tarnished the United States image across the world, as we, have been talking about. However, it's at least kind of isolated. What is going to happen if Bagram does indeed become the next Gitmo? This would be on Middle Eastern soil, an area that clearly has a lot of anti-American sentiment already, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, as our footprint has continued to grow, in Afghanistan, we've seen a growing anti-American sentiment. And if Bagram is expanded, two things are going to happen simultaneously. Provincial reconstruction teams that's being done by civilian contractors are going to slow or stop because they're going to get pulled in to expand the Bagram base. And then the second thing is anti-American sentiment is going to skyrocket. These two problems are a huge, huge security threat. General Stanley McChrystal needs to be aware of that, and he needs to make sure that provincial reconstruction does not stop and that human rights abuses are not continue to go up fester, or else an anti-American sentiment is going to take over the population, and this war is going to go down in flames.
And Jake, you mentioned your trip to Afghanistan. I know while you were there was a big explosion. I'm not sure all the details about it, but I remember that you had emailed us at RT and told us all the latest that was what was going on. But how are things over there? I mean, there was obviously this huge quote-unquote success in Marja, but what's really happening on the ground?
Well, while I was in Kabul, we were bombed almost 4 times. The roads coming into Kabul were bombed twice. Just a few blocks from my guest house was bombed, and then another guest house was bombed in the center of Kabul. So things are hardly from safe. Things are hardly from victory. Marja is a complex situation that does not pose and does not show any redeeming quality whatsoever. I think really what's going on, from my experience there, is that the Afghan people are crying, in fact, screaming for help. And the help that needs to happen is we need to see the Taliban Peace and Reconciliation Committee empowered and emboldened to do the peace talks. We need to see a less amount of night raids, like General Stan McChrystal said, and we need to see human rights and the rule of law followed, which President Obama has said that he wanted to do, although he hasn't done a good job of making sure that happens. So that's what I walked away from the trip with. I'll have more to follow with you guys after the show.
Well, Jake, we're obviously happy that you're back here safe and sound, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you and talk to someone who's actually been on the ground and can give us a real perspective.